It was a quiet evening in the city, the kind of evening when the sun has just gone down and the streetlights begin to flicker on. The air was cool, carrying a faint smell of rain that had passed earlier in the day. On one of the narrow streets, a young girl walked alone. She had a small bag slung over her shoulder and kept looking down, lost in her thoughts. Her steps were light, almost nervous, as if she felt the emptiness of the street pressing in on her. She had always liked walking through the city, even alone, but tonight something felt different. The usual sounds of distant cars and occasional chatter seemed muted, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was watching her. She tried to ignore it, telling herself she was being silly, that the street was safe. But deep down, a small knot of unease had formed in her stomach. As she passed a corner, the sound of engines suddenly broke the quiet. A group of bikers appeared, riding slowly, their motorcycles loud and dominating in the otherwise calm street. The engines rumbled like thunder rolling in the distance. She tried to step aside, hoping to give them space, but their attention quickly shifted to her. Their eyes followed her, and an uncomfortable feeling settled over her. The bikers started circling the area, laughing among themselves, their voices rough and mocking. She could hear their words, though she tried not to. Comments that were meant to intimidate, jokes that were cruel, and questions that felt invasive. She kept walking faster, clutching her bag tighter, her heart beating in her chest like a drum. She thought about where she could go, which streets were safe, and how she could disappear into the crowd that wasn't there tonight. Her steps faltered when one of the bikers moved closer, blocking her path. The others flanked her on both sides, their presence heavy and threatening. She froze, unsure what to do, feeling completely surrounded. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, and her hands trembled. The street that usually felt familiar now felt like a trap. She tried to speak, to ask them to leave her alone, but the words caught in her throat. Fear had taken over, and she could only step back slightly, hoping they would misunderstand her hesitation and move away. But they didn't. Instead, they moved closer, their laughter filling the empty space of the street. Each movement they made seemed calculated, aimed at making her feel smaller and more helpless. One of them leaned down slightly, speaking in a tone that was meant to intimidate. She shook her head, trying to signal that she wanted no trouble, that she just wanted to go home safely. But it didn't help. The group seemed to take pleasure in seeing her fear, in seeing how trapped she felt. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, but running felt impossible. They had blocked the street and were watching her every move. Her mind raced. Should she scream? Would anyone hear her? She looked down the street and saw no one, just the dim glow of the streetlights and the shadows stretching across the asphalt. She felt the weight of isolation pressing on her, and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't just fear. It was a deep sense of vulnerability, the feeling that she was completely alone against people who didn't care about her safety. As the bikers continued their harassment, she tried to keep calm, to think of a way out. She remembered that there was a small cafe a few blocks away that sometimes stayed open late. Maybe she could get there. But as she started to move, one of the bikers blocked her again, making her step back. Her heart sank. She realized that getting away was not going to be simple. Meanwhile, from a distance, someone was watching. They had been passing through the area, just another person walking through the city streets, when they noticed the scene unfolding. They observed the bikers surrounding the girl, noticed the fear in her eyes, and felt a surge of concern. Their steps slowed, and they stopped to watch more closely, trying to figure out what was happening. They could see the girl's hesitation, the way she clutched her bag, and the tension that hung thick in the air. The bikers didn't notice this observer. They were too focused on their game, on the power they felt from cornering someone who seemed defenseless. But the observer could see clearly. They could see that the girl wasn't just scared. She was trapped and needed help, and they knew that something had to be done before the situation got worse. Back on the street, the girl's mind was racing. She thought about calling someone, anyone, but her phone was in her bag, and reaching for it felt risky with the bikers so close. She tried to remember self-defense tips she had read about, ways to stay safe if someone tried to hurt her. But fear made it hard to think clearly. Every step felt heavier, and every sound seemed amplified. The rumble of the engines, the laughter, the occasional shout. It all pressed in on her, making it almost impossible to breathe. One of the bikers leaned against his motorcycle, watching her with a smirk. He moved his hand as if to grab her attention, and she flinched. The other bikers closed in slightly, and she realized that her options were shrinking. There was no easy escape, no quick solution. The street that had seemed safe just minutes ago now felt like a cage. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself that panicking wouldn't help. She scanned the street again, hoping for any sign of help. That's when she noticed movement in the distance, someone approaching. It wasn't clear who it was yet, but it gave her a small spark of hope. Her heart skipped a beat. Maybe she wasn't completely alone. The bikers, however, didn't notice. They were too absorbed in their own amusement, too caught up in the thrill of intimidating someone who seemed vulnerable. They didn't see the way the observer's eyes narrowed, the way their jaw set in determination. The observer began to move carefully, quietly, approaching the scene with caution but with clear intent. The girl, still unaware that help was nearby, felt a flicker of courage. She kept her head down, tried to make herself small and hoped that someone would intervene before things got worse. Her mind raced with what-ifs, but the most important thought was simple. She wanted to get home safely. She wanted the fear to end. The tension in the street was thick. The bikers laughed and jeered, thinking they had the upper hand. The girl's hands shook, but she held onto her bag as if it were a lifeline. And in the shadows, the observer continued to close the distance, ready to step in. The scene was set, the stage prepared for what would happen next. The girl didn't know it yet, but her courage and the arrival of someone who would not stand by silently were about to change everything. The street seemed endless, but in that moment, everything was focused on the small figure of the girl surrounded by the bikers. Her fear was palpable, but so was her determination to survive this encounter. The bikers, caught in their own world of bravado, didn't notice the approaching force that would soon disrupt their plans. And as the evening air hung heavy, there was a sense that something was about to happen, something that would shift the balance of power and bring hope to a situation that seemed hopeless. The girl's eyes darted nervously from side to side, searching for any sign of escape. Her breath came in quick, uneven gasps, and she could feel her heartbeat pounding in her chest. She reminded herself to stay calm, to move carefully, but every instinct screamed that she was in danger. And yet, even in the midst of fear, a small spark of hope remained, fueled by the faint movement of the person approaching from a distance. The bikers, still laughing and jeering, hadn't yet realized that their dominance was about to be challenged. The street that had felt like a trap was about to become the scene of a confrontation that would not go as they expected. And for the girl, the arrival of help, though unseen, began to shift her perspective. She still felt fear, but it was now mingled with the first glimmer of relief, a sense that she might not be completely alone after all. As the evening deepened and the streetlights flickered, the girl prepared herself for what might come next. She stayed close to the edge of the street, ready to move if she had the chance. Her eyes remained fixed on the bikers, noting their movements, their expressions, and the patterns of their behavior. And in the distance, the observer continued to close in, their presence a silent promise that the girl would not face this danger alone. The scene was tense, the outcome uncertain, but the story of courage, intervention, and the strength of human spirit was about to begin. From a short distance away, someone was walking through the quiet streets, unaware that they were about to witness something that needed attention. Their steps slowed as they noticed the girl surrounded by bikers. The sight made them stop completely. The girl looked scared, her body tense, her hands clutching her bag tightly. The bikers laughed and spoke in harsh, mocking tones, clearly enjoying the fear they were creating. The observer's mind raced. They could see that the girl was trapped and had no easy way to escape. Something had to be done. The observer looked at the bikers, trying to figure out the safest way to intervene. They noticed how the bikers moved together, their coordination suggesting they were used to intimidating people. It wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was deliberate. The girl's small figure in the middle of the group made her seem even more vulnerable. The observer felt a surge of determination. They couldn't just stand by and watch. As the observer approached slowly, the bikers remained unaware of their presence. The observer stayed at a careful distance, analyzing the situation. They could see the fear in the girl's eyes, and it made them more determined to act. The bikers were laughing, making rude comments, and moving closer, trying to show dominance. The girl shifted nervously, looking for an escape, but there seemed to be none. The observer's steps were careful and deliberate. They wanted to make sure the bikers noticed them without causing the situation to escalate too quickly. They knew that a direct confrontation might provoke the group, but ignoring the problem wasn't an option. The girl needed help, and the observer decided they were going to provide it no matter the risk. The girl noticed the observer moving closer and felt a tiny spark of hope. Her eyes followed the figure as they approached. She wasn't sure who it was or what they would do, but just knowing someone was coming gave her a little courage. She stayed as calm as she could, trying to avoid drawing more attention to herself, but the tension in the air was almost unbearable. The bikers were too focused on her to notice the new presence yet. The observer finally reached a point where they could be seen clearly by the bikers. They stopped and looked directly at the group. Their presence was strong, calm, and commanding. The bikers noticed immediately. For the first time, they paused and looked at someone other than the girl. There was a shift in the air, a change in energy that the bikers hadn't expected. The observer's confident stance and steady gaze made them hesitate. The girl felt a wave of relief seeing someone stand up to the bikers. She didn't know their name, didn't know their intentions, but the simple fact that someone else had noticed her danger gave her hope. She straightened slightly, feeling just a little stronger, knowing she was not completely alone. The observer's calm presence was a silent promise that she might be safe after all. The bikers, now aware of the observer, exchanged looks. There was a brief moment of uncertainty. They had been so sure of their control, so confident in their ability to intimidate. Now the unexpected presence of someone else disrupted their plans. They laughed, trying to appear fearless, but there was a hint of caution in their eyes. They didn't know if this person was alone, if they had backup, or if they were capable of action. The uncertainty made them uneasy. The observer slowly started to move closer, their steps measured and deliberate. They spoke firmly, their voice carrying across the street. They told the bikers to stop and leave the girl alone. Their tone was calm but full of authority, making it clear that they were not to be ignored. The bikers tried to laugh it off, but the confidence in the observer's voice made the laughter sound weak. The girl watched as the observer continued to approach. Her fear was still present, but it was now mixed with a sense of safety. She could see that someone had taken control of the situation, that she was not alone. She clutched her bag a little less tightly and tried to take a step back, moving slightly away from the bikers as the observer came closer. The tension in the street was high, but the dynamic was shifting. The bikers tried to regain their confidence, stepping forward and speaking louder. They attempted to intimidate the observer, but their usual tricks didn't seem to work. The observer's calm and steady presence made them hesitate. They realized that this wasn't just a random passerby. This was someone who was paying attention, who was ready to act if needed. Their attempts at mockery felt less powerful now. The observer positioned themselves between the girl and the bikers. It was a subtle move, but effective. They were creating a barrier without making sudden movements, showing the bikers that they were serious but not reckless. The girl felt the space open slightly, giving her a path to move if necessary. She could see that help had arrived in the form of a person who wasn't afraid to face the bikers. The bikers looked at each other, sensing that the balance of power was shifting. They were no longer fully in control. The observer's steady stance and unwavering gaze made it clear that any aggressive action would have consequences. The girl began to breathe a little easier, noticing that the intimidation was losing its effect. The presence of someone willing to stand up for her changed everything. The observer spoke again, this time addressing the bikers directly and clearly. They told them to leave the girl alone and move away. Their voice was calm, commanding, and free from anger. It carried a sense of authority that made the bikers pause. They tried to laugh it off, but the tension was undeniable. The street was quiet except for the sound of engines idling and the observer's firm voice. The girl watched closely, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She could see that the observer wasn't just someone standing nearby. They were taking control of the situation. She realized that she might have a chance to get out safely. She stayed still, trusting the observer to manage the confrontation. The bikers were beginning to understand that their usual tactics wouldn't work here. The observer maintained their calm approach, never making sudden moves, never showing anger, but clearly signaling that the bikers should not continue. The bikers shifted uneasily, unsure how to respond. They were used to fear, used to people backing down, but this person wasn't backing down. The uncertainty in the bikers' behavior made the girl feel a little safer. The street seemed to hold its breath. The girl could feel the tension in the air, but for the first time since the encounter began, it wasn't only fear. There was a sense of possibility, a feeling that help had arrived. The observer's presence had changed the situation completely. The bikers, now cautious, began to reconsider their next moves. The girl felt a small spark of courage, knowing that she might be able to escape the danger soon. The observer continued to stand firmly, their eyes never leaving the bikers. They were ready to act if needed, but for now the calm and confident stance was enough. The bikers, sensing that their intimidation was losing effect, started to hesitate. The girl realized that she had someone to rely on, even if just for a moment. She felt a small but growing sense of relief. Time seemed to stretch as the bikers weighed their options. They had cornered someone before and had been in control, but this was different. The observer was not afraid, and that presence was powerful. The girl felt that safety was near, that the situation could be resolved without violence. Her heart still raced, but the hope was stronger than the fear. Finally, the observer's calm authority began to influence the bikers. They took a step back, exchanging uncertain looks. The girl could see that their confidence was shaken. The observer maintained eye contact, never moving hastily, never showing aggression. The balance of power had shifted, and the girl realized that she might get out safely after all. She stayed close to the observer's side, ready to follow their guidance, and hoped that the bikers would finally leave. The bikers hesitated, their usual confidence shaken by the observer's calm and firm presence. The girl watched closely, trying to remain as quiet and still as possible. Her hands gripped her bag tightly, but she felt a small sense of relief knowing she wasn't alone anymore. The observer's steady stance was enough to make the bikers pause and rethink their actions. One of the bikers tried to laugh, attempting to regain control. He spoke in a loud, mocking tone, but the laughter sounded forced. The observer didn't react aggressively. Instead, they stood firm, their eyes locked on the bikers, showing no fear. Their presence alone created an unspoken warning. Any further aggression would have consequences. The girl took a small step backward, trying to find a little more space, moving toward the direction that seemed safer. The observer subtly shifted, placing themselves slightly closer to her, creating a protective barrier. This simple movement gave the girl more confidence. She realized that she had someone who could intervene if necessary, and that gave her the courage to stay calm and think clearly. The bikers exchanged uncertain glances. They were used to people backing down, to seeing fear take over, but this person didn't flinch. One of the bikers, trying to assert dominance, revved his motorcycle. The loud roar of the engine echoed through the quiet street, intended to intimidate. The observer didn't move, didn't show alarm. The biker tried again, moving closer, but the observer's calm and commanding presence didn't waver. The biker stopped, sensing that this person wasn't like others they had confronted before. The girl's heart raced as she watched the tension unfold. She felt fear, of course, but it was mixed now with hope. The observer was clearly experienced in managing dangerous situations, and their presence had already shifted the dynamic. She stayed still, trusting that help was here and that she might be able to move safely when the right moment came. The observer spoke firmly to the bikers, telling them to leave the girl alone. Their voice was calm but carried authority. The bikers tried to mock the words, speaking louder, attempting to break the tension, but the observer didn't flinch. The calmness was disarming. The bikers began to hesitate, unsure how to proceed. They were no longer fully in control. The observer's presence had introduced uncertainty, and the bikers didn't like it. The girl noticed a small change in the bikers' body language. They were shifting from aggressive postures to ones that suggested caution. Their movements became slower, less confident. The observer continued to hold their ground, making subtle but deliberate gestures that signaled strength without aggression. This quiet confidence made the bikers reconsider their actions. The observer moved slightly closer to the girl, but in a way that didn't provoke the bikers. The movement was subtle but intentional, creating a physical buffer between her and the group. This small act provided the girl with reassurance. She realized that she now had some control over the situation, thanks to the observer's careful intervention. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and began to focus on what she needed to do next. The bikers, sensing their control slipping away, began to speak amongst themselves. Their words were low, almost inaudible, but the tension between them was clear. They were uncertain how to react. They had been confident moments ago, but the calm authority of the observer had disrupted their usual dynamic. The girl felt her courage growing, She could see that the bikers were no longer as intimidating as before. One of the bikers tried to step forward, testing the observer. The observer didn't move or react aggressively. Instead, they maintained a steady gaze, showing that they were ready for any action but would not be provoked. The biker paused, sensing the unspoken challenge. The tension in the street grew, but the observer's calmness remained unshaken, giving the girl a sense of security she hadn't felt before. The girl took another small step backward, careful not to provoke the bikers. She stayed close to the observer, who subtly guided her movement with their presence. She could feel the space between her and the bikers increasing just slightly, but enough to give her hope. Her heart was still pounding, but fear was beginning to mix with relief. She realized that she might soon be able to move safely away. The bikers tried one more time to intimidate. They spoke louder, made gestures, and revved the motorcycles again. The observer didn't react with anger or aggression. Instead, they maintained their calm, authoritative presence, showing that they were fully in control of the situation. The bikers' confidence faltered. They were used to people responding with fear, but this was different. The girl felt her courage growing, knowing that the observer was not going to let anything happen to her. The observer slowly began to shift their weight, subtly positioning themselves so the girl could see a clear path to safety. It was a careful movement, not rushed but deliberate. The girl understood the signal. She stayed close to the observer, ready to move when the moment was right. The bikers noticed the shift, and for a moment confusion crossed their faces. They didn't know how to respond to someone who was calm, confident, and clearly in control. The observer spoke once more, firmly but without anger, telling the bikers to leave and make their way out. The words carried authority. The bikers laughed nervously, trying to mask their hesitation, but it was clear that the situation had changed. Their usual tactics were no longer effective. The girl could see that the balance of power had shifted. She felt hope rising, knowing that she was close to being safe. The bikers exchanged more glances, their movements cautious. They had underestimated the observer. The girl took another small step back, guided by the observer's subtle positioning. She was gaining confidence. She realized that help had arrived and that she was not alone. The observer's calm and steady presence had given her a sense of safety she hadn't felt since the bikers first approached. The bikers, sensing that their intimidation was losing its effect, began to move slightly away. Their body language suggested uncertainty and caution. The girl felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She was close to being able to escape the danger. She stayed close to the observer, trusting their guidance and prepared for the moment when she could move safely. Time seemed to stretch as the bikers continued to hesitate. The girl remained alert, her eyes scanning for any sudden movements, but she trusted the observer. The calm, authoritative presence was a shield between her and the bikers. She took slow, deep breaths, trying to steady herself. The tension was still high, but hope was now stronger than fear. The observer's steady presence and firm words gradually influenced the bikers. They took another small step back, clearly reassessing the situation. The girl noticed the change and felt a sense of relief. She realized that she might soon be able to move away safely. Her trust in the observer gave her courage. She stayed close, ready to follow their lead, and waited for the right moment. The bikers looked at each other, uncertainty written across their faces. They were no longer fully confident in their intimidation. The observer maintained eye contact, showing readiness but not aggression. The girl felt that safety was within reach. She stayed alert but calm, knowing that the observer would guide her. The biker's hesitation continued, and the girl prepared herself to take advantage of the opportunity to move toward safety. Finally, the observers subtly positioned themselves to create a clear path for the girl. It was a quiet, deliberate movement, showing the bikers that they were serious but not aggressive. The girl understood the signal. She stayed close, ready to follow the path. The bikers, sensing the observer's control, began to step back. The girl felt a mix of relief and hope. She realized that the danger was beginning to fade. The observer's calm, confident, and protective presence had made the difference. The bikers took a cautious step back, their usual bravado fading as they realized the observer would not be intimidated. The girl stayed close, feeling safer but still tense. Every nerve in her body was alert, every sound amplified by the lingering fear. She kept her bag tightly pressed to her chest, ready to move if needed. The observer's presence gave her hope, but she knew the situation was not fully resolved. The observer carefully assessed the bikers' body language. Their hesitation was growing. They were used to fear and compliance, but here they found neither. The observer took slow, deliberate steps, keeping their movements calm yet assertive. Each step was a silent message. The girl was protected, and they would not allow aggression to continue. The bikers began to shift uneasily, unsure how to proceed. The girl felt a small surge of courage. She realized she could now follow subtle instructions from the observer to move toward safety. She took a careful step back, staying just behind the observer, who subtly guided her movement. The bikers noticed and tried to react, but the observer's firm stance and steady gaze made it clear that any aggressive action would be met with immediate intervention. One of the bikers tried to step forward, revving his motorcycle to intimidate. The observer didn't react with fear or anger. Instead, they maintained a calm, commanding presence. The biker's move seemed less threatening now. The girl realized that the observer's calm authority was having an effect. The bikers were beginning to doubt themselves, unsure of what to do next. Their usual dominance was fading. The observer began to speak clearly and firmly, directing the bikers to leave the girl alone and move away. The words were calm, authoritative, and unwavering. The bikers attempted to laugh and make jokes, but the laughter sounded strained and uncertain. Their confidence had been shaken by the observer's presence. The girl noticed the change and felt a growing sense of relief. She could see that the situation was beginning to turn in her favor. The observer subtly adjusted their position, moving slightly to create a clear path for the girl to escape. She followed, staying close and moving cautiously, feeling the tension slowly decrease. Each step toward safety brought a small sense of relief. The bikers, seeing that their intimidation was losing power, began to hesitate more. They were unsure how to respond to someone who remained calm, confident, and unflinching. The girl's heart still raced, but her fear was mixed with hope. She realized she was not alone and that help had arrived just in time. The observer's presence had given her the strength to stay composed. She followed each subtle cue, trusting the observer to guide her to safety. The bikers were now clearly unsettled, their previous confidence eroded by the observer's authority. The observer continued to speak firmly, making it clear that the bikers had no right to intimidate anyone. Their voice carried across the street, firm but calm, showing control without aggression. The bikers shifted uneasily, unsure how to react. Their laughter and gestures became less threatening, replaced by a growing sense of caution. The girl could see that the observer's presence had effectively neutralized the danger. The observer slowly moved to position themselves fully between the girl and the bikers. The subtle movement created a protective barrier, allowing the girl to see a clear path to safety. She followed, taking careful steps, trusting the observer to guide her. The bikers, sensing their intimidation tactics were failing, began to move back slowly. Their expression showed frustration and confusion. The girl felt her courage increase with each step, knowing she was now closer to safety. The observer maintained eye contact with the bikers, their calm and firm demeanor leaving no room for misjudgment. The bikers, now clearly hesitant, were losing control of the situation. The girl stayed close, keeping her movements small and deliberate, following the observer's lead. She realized that she had someone who would not let anything happen to her, and that realization brought a profound sense of relief. The bikers tried to regain some confidence, making small movements forward, but each time, the observer subtly shifted to maintain a protective stance. The girl felt the space between herself and the bikers increasing, giving her more room to breathe and move. The observer's careful guidance allowed her to stay calm. Despite the lingering tension in the air, the observer spoke once more, clearly stating that the bikers should leave immediately and stop harassing the girl. The calm authority in their voice reinforced the message. The bikers, now visibly frustrated, began to step back further. The girl felt a growing sense of safety. Each step taken under the observer's guidance brought her closer to leaving the threat behind. The girl's confidence grew as she followed the observer's subtle cues. She could see the bikers' hesitation and knew that their power over her fear was diminishing. The observer's calm, firm, and protective presence had turned the situation around. The girl realized that the bikers were no longer in control. She was still alert, but the fear that had dominated her moments ago was gradually being replaced by relief and hope. The observer carefully led the girl down the street, maintaining a position that kept the bikers at a distance. The girl moved cautiously, aware of the remaining risk but trusting the observer completely. The bikers, realizing that their intimidation tactics had failed, began to retreat, their confidence eroded by the observer's calm authority. The girl's heartbeat began to slow as she followed the observer. The tension in the street was still present, but the danger was clearly lessening. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and relief. The observer's presence had given her the courage to stay composed and move toward safety. Each step brought her closer to leaving the bikers behind. The bikers exchanged glances, unsure how to respond to the observer's calm and firm stance. They took further steps back, their expressions showing frustration and confusion. The girl felt her courage continue to grow. She realized that the observer had not only protected her, but had also restored a sense of control over the situation. The bikers were no longer a threat, and the girl was now on the path to safety. The observer remained vigilant, keeping a watchful eye on the bikers as they continued to retreat. The girl followed closely, feeling a growing sense of relief and hope. She realized that she had someone who would not let anything happen to her, and that realization brought a profound sense of safety. The bikers' power over her fear had been effectively neutralized. As they moved further away, the observer ensured that the girl could reach a safe location without further interference. The girl's fear gradually gave way to relief. She could see that the bikers were no longer in control, and that she was now free to move without immediate threat. The observer's calm, confident, and protective presence had made all the difference, turning a frightening situation into a path toward safety. The girl finally felt the tension lift slightly as the bikers continued to retreat. Her heart still raced, but she was no longer frozen with fear. She realized that she was moving toward safety, guided by the calm and steady presence of the observer. Each step away from the bikers brought her a sense of relief, and the fear that had dominated her moments ago began to fade. The observer kept a careful watch on the bikers, ensuring that they didn't turn back or attempt any sudden moves. Their calm authority remained firm, creating a protective barrier around the girl as they moved further down the street. The girl followed closely, her hands still gripping her bag, but the tightness had eased. She could feel the safety growing with each passing moment. As they walked, the observer spoke quietly to her, reassuring her and giving instructions on how to stay safe. They reminded her to keep moving, to stay aware of her surroundings, and to trust that she was no longer alone. The girl listened carefully, her fear slowly giving way to gratitude and relief. The observer's presence had not only protected her physically, but had also helped calm her mind, giving her the confidence to move forward. The bikers had stopped at a distance, uncertain how to proceed. Their aggressive demeanor had faded, replaced by frustration and hesitation. They watched the observer and the girl, realizing that their intimidation had failed. The girl felt a small surge of courage, knowing that the bikers no longer held power over her. She kept following the observer, her steps careful but deliberate, moving toward a safer area. The observer guided her toward a well-lit street where more people were present. The change in surroundings added to her sense of security. She could see others nearby, and the presence of more people made the threat from the bikers feel smaller. The observer stayed close, ensuring that she reached the safer street without incident. The girl felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that she was no longer alone and vulnerable. As they continued walking, the observer kept a steady pace, allowing the girl to keep up without feeling rushed. They maintained a protective presence, subtly positioning themselves to shield her from any possible danger. The bikers had stopped following, their retreat complete, but the observer remained vigilant until the girl was fully in a safe area. The girl felt a growing sense of trust and gratitude for the person who had come to her aid. The observer spoke again, calmly instructing the girl to stay in the safer area until she could reach her destination or someone she trusted. They reassured her that the immediate danger had passed and that she was no longer alone. The girl nodded, feeling her body relax for the first time since the encounter began. She realized that the observer's presence had made all the difference, providing protection and calm in a moment of fear. The girl looked back briefly, seeing the bikers at a distance, no longer a threat. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of courage. She had faced a terrifying situation, but with the help of someone who remained calm, confident, and protective, she had moved from fear to safety. The observer's intervention had not only stopped the immediate danger, but had also shown her the Importance of courage and support in difficult moments. The observer stayed with her until she felt confident to continue on her own. They gave final words of encouragement, reminding her to stay aware and to trust her instincts. The girl thanked them, her voice filled with emotion. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the person who had stepped in when she needed help the most. The observer nodded and quietly moved away, leaving her in the safety of the well-lit street. The girl took a few moments to collect herself, feeling the tension in her body slowly release. She realized that she had experienced something frightening, but had also witnessed bravery and calm intervention in action. The encounter with the bikers had been terrifying, but the observer's presence had turned it into a story of courage, protection, and human support. She felt empowered by the experience, knowing that even in moments of fear, help could arrive unexpectedly. She began walking toward her home, taking careful steps but with a sense of renewed confidence. The city streets that had felt threatening moments ago now seemed less daunting. The girl understood the importance of staying aware, but she also knew that she had experienced the kindness and bravery of someone willing to protect her. The lesson stayed with her. Courage, calmness, and action could make all the difference in moments of fear. As she walked, the girl reflected on the entire encounter. The fear she had felt was real and intense, but so was the relief and safety that followed. She thought about the observer's calm presence, the way they had taken control without aggression, and the way they had guided her to safety. She realized that true courage was not about fighting recklessly, but about protecting and acting wisely. The girl reached her home safely, the familiar surroundings providing a sense of closure. She felt a deep gratitude for the person who had intervened, knowing that without them the situation could have been far worse. She understood that moments of danger could appear unexpectedly, but so could moments of bravery and help. The encounter had been frightening, but it had also shown her the strength of human support. She took a moment to breathe, letting the emotions of the night settle. Relief, gratitude, and a sense of empowerment mixed within her. She realized that even in a moment of helplessness, she had not been truly alone. The observer's presence had changed everything, providing safety, calm, and guidance. She felt a renewed respect for courage and the importance of standing up for others in difficult situations.